Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Drinks and Dress. It's great to have you here, and I'm really excited about our program today. And now I'm so thrilled and excited to welcome to our show Megan Martinelli, the Associate Curator of Textiles and Apparel, Jewelry, and Accessories at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Megan. It's so good to see you.
Thank you
And
so much, Leon. Hi,
you're welcome.
everyone.
And a brief whoop whoop about Megan. Megan has her BA in English Literature from Providence College and her master's in Historic Textiles and Costumes at the University of Rhode Island. After working in Historic Textiles and Costume Collection at URI, she went on to work as the research assistant at the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Craving a smaller institution where her work could have greater impact, she came to Hillwood, as she was drawn to the one influential woman in particular, Marjorie Merriweather Post. Um, and through Martinelli's work, looking at Post's sartorial choices, which reflected a growing American industry that was evolving to encourage native designers. While she could have afforded to wear major French couture designs, she felt it important to support smaller dressmakers, largely first generation immigrants to the US like Oldric Royce or Frances Spingold or Madame Frances. And in Post's case, this is an in depth focus on her as an individual and allows for a great scope of her background and of her collection. So, with that, I would love to welcome you, Megan, to Drinks and Dress and Drinks. We're doing everything today. It's great to see you. I used to live in Southern Maryland. I taught at St. Mary's College of Maryland for 6 years, and um, Hillwood was one of my favorite museums to go to in DC. So it's
Oh,
great to
that's so
have
great
you
to
here.
hear. Thank you so much, Leon. All right, so a little bit about what we'll be talking about. I tried to play off of the theme, so in homage to the theme, we've got our founder, Marjorie Merriweather Post, holding court at the front of at the head of the table, all dressed up with several glasses in front of her, and also a menu that dates to about 63 years ago this week. Really fun, and you can see the drink and the wine list at the bottom. So very timely and seasonal menus were served at Hillwood. Uh, I'll be sharing a little bit of an intro into Hillwood if you're not familiar, and a background on Marjorie Post, and then we'll kind of have a bunch of breakneck, dense slides to go through our very vast costume collection, mostly highlights, so some of the super hits from the collection. And my own portfolio also includes textiles, jewelry, and accessories. So those will be sprinkled
Fantastic.
in a little bit because they're very dress and adornment adjacent.
Yes.
Um,
I love the menu that you've included. I mean, please tell
well,
me
I'm
more.
so glad. Yeah, so Bellini and caviar, always a great first course.
Exactly.
Um,
And angel food cake is one of my most favorite things. So you're striking
Absolutely
all the chords tonight, Megan.
fabulous. I'd like to start off strong. Um, so,
Oh,
uh,
and pardon me, I forgot. Our cocktail of the evening is the gin Ricky. So
oh, great.
I've modified it a little bit with an orange slice today. So here we are.
Very nice. Marjorie Post wasn't a very big drinker herself, but she, I think, did imbibe in a little bit of gin in the evening. So I think that's very apropos of our topic tonight, Leon. So, if you don't know, Hillwood is situated in Northwest DC, and it was purchased by Marjorie Post in 1955. The mansion existed and was built in the 20s, but Marjorie Post renovated it herself to suit her desire to leave it as a museum to inspire and educate the public. We opened publicly as a museum in 1977, about 4 years after Marjorie Post passed. And it's nestled on 25 acres adjacent to Rock Creek Park and has about 13 acres of formal gardens. And this is the time to be at Hillwood right now. Everything is in bloom. It is stunning, azaleas, tulips everywhere. I sometimes feel a little bit desensitized to it during the winter months. I mean, it still looks gorgeous. Our horticulture staff works really hard, but it's this time of year that gets me very excited to come into the office and be surrounded by this splendor. So I'm also included because I feel like it wouldn't look out of place in the formal gardens. A piece from my portfolio, her mystery set Van Cleef and Arpels ruby and diamond brooch from 1969 that she acquired, that lives in
Stunning.
part of my portfolio today.
I have to say, I'm a huge fan of Van Cleef and Arpels, and you don't hear much about them today. But really, such beautiful jewelry, and they had a great perfume and cologne in
Ooh,
years past. Yes.
I don't know about that. I'm gonna have to look into the perfume and cologne. But yeah, they're an amazing jewelry firm. And in a few minutes, when I show you some photos of Marjorie Post wearing some of the costumes in our collection, it's great to see how she folds in her jewelry collection into her ensembles. So, just again, a little more background. We're known for her collection of imperial Russian decorative arts. And so, we, of course, have two imperial Fabergé Easter eggs. The one that I have on this slide is known as the Catherine the Great egg, and it was given by Emperor Nicholas II to his mom in 1914, inspired obviously by Catherine the Great. We also have other kind of apparel adjacent pieces from the imperial Russian family, like the nuptial crown, which was actually worn by Empress Alexandra when she married Nicholas II, and
Oh,
it is made out of diamonds. It has about uh, 1,535 diamonds that date back.
about as you'd
Yeah,
have.
yeah, they date back to the time of Emperor Paul the First. So that would have been
Lovely.
Catherine the Great's son, and that actually was made from his apparel. So I wanted to share that they repurposed it in the 1880s for the marriage of Nicholas and Alexandra. So if you don't know, Marjorie Post became very interested in Russian art in the early 20th century when she was living there in the late 1930s with her husband, who was ambassador to the Soviet Union. And she saw a lot of connection between French 18th century decorative arts with uh, the Imperial Russian art that she was noticing after the Russian Revolution. Um, So then again, just wanted to share my favorite portrait in the collection because it's stunning and is a great example of 18th century costume. So this is a Jean-Marc Nattier portrait of the Duchess of Parma, who is the daughter of Louis the 15th, with her own daughter Isabel. And I just really love kind of the texture of the silk and how it's depicted in this portrait. So even you get a little bit of exposure to previous time periods in dress and jewelry history via some of the wonderful portraits that decorate Hillwood. And of course, there's tapestries on the walls here too, textile aficionado delight. Uh, these are some Beauvais tapestries that we're looking at in
Wow.
that photo. So it's worth seeing even if you're not. You can see more than costumes. That is very exciting, I think, for people.
Well, I think what's wonderful about Hillwood is that it's that wonderful interaction between dress, adornment, interiors, decorative arts, jewelry, all of it, and fine art, and how they all relate to each other. It's a really wonderful example of all of those things, especially being it's her own private home, and these
Mhm.
are her own private things. So it's really sort of the whole picture, shall we say.
Yes, she was definitely an aesthete. Here she is in the 1960s looking over the setting of her table, making sure everything is in place. She served her guests in the dining room. She loved to entertain, and they would be served on historic porcelain. So we set the table and change out the services twice a year so that we can showcase all of those pieces that she collected. So she really was kind of top to bottom interested in the experience at Hillwood. So now just a little bit of background about Marjorie Post, who we actually, or I, call MMP. I think a lot of people do, short for Marjorie Meriwether Post. Just kind of slides off the tongue a little quicker than Marjorie Meriwether Post. She was born in 1887 and passed away in 1973. And her mother and father were both born in the mid 19th century, and they're from the Midwest. Her father was a very interesting, intrepid businessman, an inventor. He developed his own plow and other agricultural implements that he
Oh, wow.
sold during the 1870s. And then in the 1880s, he relocated with his wife, Ella Lettia Meriwether Post, who's on the left of this slide in that picture hat with the plumage, and their young daughter, their only daughter, Marjorie or MMP, to Battle Creek, Michigan, where C.W. Post was enjoying some of the benefits of John Harvey Kellogg's approach to nutrition. C.W. Post was very inspired by Kellogg and invited a coffee substitute called Postum that he felt had very healthful benefits in 1880, 1894. And then he pretty soon recognized that there's a whole potential for a strong market in breakfast cereals and invented grape nuts. He built his own even paper mill. Ooh, sorry. Getting ahead of myself. He built his own paper mill and was able to manufacture his own boxes and cartons. Like it really was a top to bottom
Oh,
industry.
wow.
He essentially created an empire. And in 1908, he had Post Toasties added to the roster, and then just a lot of prepared, convenient foods that we think of coming out in the early 20th century were acquired by C.W. Post. He did have a lot of health issues, but he traveled often and was very successful because he was interested in running the company very efficiently. His wife, Ella, also enjoyed traveling. She liked to go to Asia and beyond. She was maybe a less formative part of Marjorie Post's life. She was often sick. She took on a very kind of caretaking and supportive role of her husband when he was sick. But unfortunately, the couple divorced in 1904. Uh, so the success of Post kind of drove them apart. Um,
Oh, but grape nuts is still delicious.
Yeah, still iconic. And I should say that post food evolved to become general food. So it has had a lasting impact on the American food industry. So a little bit more now about young Marjorie and some of the lovely treasures from her early childhood and adulthood that remain in the collection. Being the only kind of cherished child of this American empire. She did lead a very wonderful, privileged life and was able to travel and collect. But here on this slide, I have a photo of her as an infant around 1888, and she is wearing a little gold necklace that still is in the collection today with a heart charm on it that I put on the center of the slide. And Marjorie Post was often invited by her father to travel on business trips. So she learned and became very savvy in financial skills, which would prove to suit her very well in the future. And she was educated here in Washington, D.C. at Mount Vernon Seminary, which was a women's school. And she participated in the drama club. She loved the sets and the theatrics, which I think is kind of obvious later on when you look at her home and how resplendent and kind of pageantry that you see in the home. So she was very interested in kind of historical themes. So the photo is a portrait of her as a 16-year-old wearing a typical array of Edwardian jewelry, and then of also her Sweet 16 dress, which is two pieces, bodice and skirt, stunningly ornate. There's tiers of spotted cotton tulle, and there's vertical strips with bordered by silk velvet cording. It's covered in little seed pearls and coral, which is good luck for young people.
Wow.
Um, Rhinestones and sequins. I'm actually going to come back to this dress at the very end.
Oh, great, because I'd love to talk about the coral. Is the coral in the little strips that are going down the
so
dress?
it's yes, it's just little coral beads.
Lovely.
So I'll show off some close-ups. I kind of do a little full circle DC thing, so I'll share
Oh,
it at
great.
the end.
Impressive.
Um, Oh, I should also, okay, so we're proceeding with some more incredible examples of this early 20th century ladies' garments. And I would also love to say that many of the photographs we're seeing here on the ensembles installed by Forms originate to my wonderful predecessor, Howard Kurtz's time, and his amazing exhibition and really incredible catalog from 2015, Ingenue to Icon. So it's wonderful that we have these beautiful photos of the garments installed on forms that can continue to be reviewed and shared by the institution. So I actually include this kind of mint green dress on the very right. You can see the bodice laying over the skirt. It's obviously separate pieces with the lace yoke. And I was wondering really if anyone recognized, this is kind of my CSA signal boost moment, that kind of punch number style label or tag that you see in the photo on the bottom. That ensemble is actually on the right of that center grouping of garments. And in the center is the back of the Sweet 16 dress. And then her Jays of London silk crepe gown with tears and beautiful satin ribbon flowers that you can just see in the wide neckline. So I'm just sharing this very interesting gown on the right and hoping someone might be able to jump in on the chats. You'll see me do that here and there in this lecture because I love the hive mind of CSA.
So is that the accession number of the dress in your collection?
No,
Oh,
it's it's a punch label. It's original to the garment. So that's why I'm
okay.
keen to hear if someone recognizes that style because there's no other labels on it. So
Oh, fascinating.
yes,
And thank you for the shout out to Howard Kurtz, who's also an icon of CSA.
of course. Um, so then we have our wonderful Marie Antoinette costume, which this was a recent kind of discovery or putting things together. She's wearing, um, she is wearing a gown, the same gown. So she's wearing her fancy dress costume in the 1920s on the right. And that's a page from her scrapbook. She loved to dress up as Marie Antoinette for obvious reasons. She also liked to collect pieces of Marie Antoinette's jewelry or furniture that she believed belonged to Marie Antoinette, especially in the early 20th century. So
Fantastic.
we have a scrapbook page where she actually annotates and gives us some little breadcrumbs about this Marie Antoinette costume that's been in the collection. She writes that it was made by Beer in Paris in 1904. And so I did a little digging. I blew that up, that little note up for you. And I did some digging and really feel that it is a Gustave Beer from the early 20th century, perhaps modified by Post 20 years later to wear as Marie Antoinette to the variety of fancy dress balls that she attended. And it's also kind of incredible that we have a photo of her from around 1904, where she's very young, and she's got her powdered Marie Antoinette wig on, and even a little bouche, or her little patch, and she probably really is imitating the Queen of France, even at that early age. So it's a pretty incredible discovery that perhaps despite not having a label, it really does look like a Gustave Beer piece from that period.
Actually, from a hair perspective, it's really fascinating to see that interpretation in the photo of the hair from that period. It's
Right.
really kind of great.
Yes, absolutely. So we continue on a little bit, another photo of her in the 20s as Marie Antoinette at Hogarcito, which was her first winter home in Palm Beach on the left, I mean on the right, and then on the left is this very cool cartoonish illustration of her in the Gustave Beer Marie Antoinette costume, dressed as Marie Antoinette, illustrated by Ralph Barton, and the caption there was "Fancy is as fancy does," which is quite lovely, in 1924 Harper's Bazaar. So it was cool to spot her there too, rendered in cartoon form. So again, I know that I mentioned, at least in the kind of program notes for this, that we can kind of go through fashion history by looking at Marjorie Post's collection of wedding gowns. So without disappointing, there are some wedding gowns, the four of them included in this presentation. So this finds her in 1905 for her marriage to Edward Close, a lawyer from Connecticut, wearing this Art Nouveau style silk satin wedding gown with this incredible kind of star-like bow at the waist that's encrusted with rhinestones. She purchased it at an import custom shop in New York called Hitchens and Balcombe. I actually found an invoice in her scrapbooks that lists previous or later purchases, perhaps. And you can see it would retail couture copies, copy pecan, calisseur, all included. So it was one of those kind of shops that would bring in imports, and they could be customized, or designers would make, dressmakers that they hired would make something special for the client.
Wow.
So really, really beautiful 1905 wedding portrait and gown still in our collection today.
Not quite ready to wear, but it's,
No,
but
yeah.
this is great evidence about the copying of couture, which,
Mhm.
happens so quickly in today's fast fashion world. That's really amazing.
Yes, but I think this was at a different level because the materials and the skills were um, much more elevated.
True.
So then we do have couture still in the collection. So we have the Calissar gown from 1908 that is really stunning, expected mixture of different techniques, cotton embroidery on the swallowtail ribbons at the front, these diamond-shaped brass plaques that you see embellishing the center front of the dress, and then repeating on the back of the bodice. Kind of that draped overlay of the moire, just like kind of a wonderful knotted ribbons happening on the skirt and at the center of the bodice and around the neckline. Really, just kind of sumptuousness of what I think dress historians expect to see in a caliseur from the 20th century. So we're really fortunate to have it in the collection. Um,
I have a question about this dress. I mean, it's absolutely stunning and very theatrical, if I may say. Uh,
yes,
the embroidery on the skirt, is that on the what I'm assuming is probably silk chiffon overlay, or is that on the
it's
velvet? It's hard to see.
so it's actually kind of a very lightweight silk and cotton moire,
Oh,
very
fantastic.
gauzy
Yeah,
embroidery embroidered onto that textile, kind of draped
gotcha.
over.
Oh,
And
and
the
and
lining is that bright orange,
yeah, it's
silk,
great.
which is,
And the pleating underneath is really fantastic. The
yeah,
underskirt to show the horizontal pleating that goes around.
oh, yes. Yeah,
Really, really gorgeous. It's just beautiful.
yeah, we're so lucky. And it will be coming out again soon. So I'll mention that at the end. But yeah, it's a lovely gown in the collection. So then a few other gowns moving a little bit forward in time, the 1910s. So she started out in the 1910s primarily living in Greenwich, Connecticut with Ed Close, and then she had two daughters, Adelaide and Eleanor. But she could commute in and out of the city and buy her couture models and visit the specialty New York custom shops that she frequented. So you can kind of see in these examples the enduring French influence. So the first one in the foreground is really incredible because it has a false bifurcation via those silk panels draped down the front and then gathered with little wax flowers. So it actually isn't bifurcated, it's just suspended at the waist to give the impression of being so. And it does kind of evoke to me this one sketch that's in the collection at the V&A that I thought I would include too, particularly with the fabric covered buttons that are just a lovely trim along the drape of the chiffon over the sleeves. So it does kind of mimic at least that style that we see in the sketch collection at the V&A. And then the gown in the background, which I'm sorry is not a great um, close up or anything of that, but it's silk velvet with then that embroidered green panel just perfectly manipulated and draped across the side of the dress and forming forming the bodice on the right side of the gown. So really just two kind of representations of the kind of gradually relaxing silhouette of the 19 teens, the higher waists.
Yes, really lovely.
Yes,
Excellent. Thank you so much.
yes. Then we have a few just shots of Roaring Twenties, the life and style of Marjorie Merriweather Post, which I curated in 2021, or I was the lead on that project. Some really great installation shots. That's her Lucille wedding dress worn in June 1920 when she married E.F. Hutton, her second husband. And it was originally kind of a periwinkle blue shade, but I include a close-up of the sash where you can see that the dye remains to get a sense. And we tried to light it, but it came out coming a little bit spooky, but I still thought it was worth showing. And then from that same, it just didn't work out. uh, in response to that question about the first husband. And then we have her Madeline and Madeline gown on the right of that display from Roaring Twenties. That dates to 1920. Um, Madeleine and Madeleine is a really interesting house in Paris. There's not much known about them, and they weren't around for very long. But the idea is that it's two cousins kind of creating these designs. And then, interestingly, Marjorie Post owned the couture version of a gown that she modeled in a fashion show that was meant in April of 1920 to raise money for devastated France. It was a takeoff on those Vogue fashion fetes from the mid 19 teens to raise money for the First World War. And she's wearing the American copy in those clippings that she purchased from a store called, or not purchased, but was given to wear from a store by Charles Kurzman. Um, Called Charles Kurzman, and the difference is really in, at least visibly, the tool is not that beautiful dark silk tulle that you see on the gown in our collection, and it's a white tulle. And then another thing, we were talking about bifurcated garments. This one actually is slightly, you could define it as bifurcated because the silk satin panels that you see coming down the front join at the hem, and there's a dress weight to maintain that lovely drape. So
Oh,
it is,
wow.
yeah, it is a little bit bifurcated.
Lovely. Thank you for explaining. Because I was looking at the picture and the of the actual garment and then the photos and the news clipping, and I was curious about the difference in those colors. So thank you
Right.
for explaining that.
Yeah, I just love that she kept the couture model.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Uh,
it's it's very Marjorie. So we've got a few other wonderful designs. Obviously,
oh,
the
lovely.
more from the 20s. So
Mm,
this is just an example of some of the smaller shops in New York that Marjorie Post patronized. Many of them were women owned. Thurn, Eldridge Manning, and Madame Frances. They're pretty rare, and obviously they don't have records or archives, but they functioned in a way that they would import couture gowns and sell them with their own labels, or copy them, or make something custom. So those were some that I think were mentioned in the introduction, especially Madame Frances. So that amazing ombre gown became kind of the inspiration for our Roaring Twenties art, which I thought folks would find amusing. So it was illustrated in Women's Wear Daily. I always love when I spot an illustration of Marjorie Post in gowns in the fashion press contemporarily, because it can give me a little bit of insight on what jewelry she wore, what event, what year, especially if it doesn't have a label. Um, so the next wedding dress
oh, wow.
is her Bergdorf Goodman. She was a very loyal Bergdorf Goodman client. This one's from 1935 with silk velvet and white fox fur trim. I especially love this one because of the uh, treatment around the neckline. It's a gathered panel at the center front that then joins at the waist. And I've seen some B&A gowns from this period that have a similar kind of construction technique. So it always kind of excites me to see that coming through in her Bergdorf Goodman wedding gown. So this is the gown she wore to marry Joseph Davies, who would then become the ambassador to the Soviet Union.
Thank you. Wow. I
Yes.
love that trim on that. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Look at this. This
Yes,
is
so
gorgeous.
this is one of my favorites in the collection, in anticipation that perhaps someone might ask. Another Bergdorf Goodman piece, and I had to include a detail of the kind of border printed silk, and where it's been carefully cut and hand stitched to join the silk at the front of the skirt, below the smocking, adding some detail. So this is one of my favorite pieces in the collection. I just think it's stunning, and so elegant and evocative of cashmere shawls. Um,
Yeah, that's beautiful. How the pattern drapes down the back. That's really stunning.
Yes, it is a wonderful kind of masterful plan of manipulating the textile. So I really wanted to include it because it really does look like it's just made out of a scarf.
Hmm.
So she had a very relatable quirk of, buying some fraternal twins of garments that she especially liked. So here I'm calling out two Piguet gowns from Paris from around 1937. So after they were assigned to she and her husband were assigned to be on station at the Soviet Union as the he was the U.S. ambassador. He was then reassigned to Belgium. So she was in Brussels from 1938 to 1939. So she did a little shopping just before the war while in Europe. And she commissioned also these Rosie Renault jackets or coat dresses for the colder Russian climate as well. Other favorite pieces
Oh,
as we are trying to wrap up but get to the end of my slides are these 1930s printed silk taffeta gowns with a crossover bodice and kind of a huge bustle bow in the back. These are unlabeled, so again, I'd love to research the printed textile and learn a little more about these two pieces. And we're kind of given the gift of having a photo of Post wearing the fern printed gown at the center, which is always helpful. Um,
these are
so
amazing prints. I mean, I'm so surprised at those. Those are such bold, big
they
prints.
are, and it's fun. This is a period where I think she does kind of embrace prints a little more, which I think is really fun. Kind of plays around a little bit. Um, so this is her portrait gown that was made by the costume designer Ori Kelly, kind of in anticipation of her on-screen or planned on-screen appearance in the film adaptation of her husband's memoir, Joseph Davies' memoir called Mission to Moscow, from being the ambassador to Soviet Union. That was then produced by Warner Brothers and released in 1943. It has an unfinished hem, so it truly is a portrait gown. She wore it for a lot of fittings because she probably loved the padded embroidery, kind of metallic padded embroidery and faux pearls that you see at the shoulders. And she's always kind of dressing for her jewelry, which I think I mentioned. So she always likes a portrait or open neckline so that she can show off her necklaces and brooches. And she has a great decollage. So here she is again in more Bergdorf Goodman. This is a great bugle beaded gown over silk chiffon, and I included a snapshot of the label, but you can also see the chain stitching of the beading and how it was done to accommodate the wonderful print on the silk organza. The jewelry in this photo is definitely still around. This is her really well-known sapphire and diamond necklace set in platinum that she had made out of fringe bracelets and then provided this 38.81 carat Burmese sapphire from her own collection to have a brooch so made that then could be the center of the necklace. So she liked things that were adaptable. Um,
I mean, statement necklace.
Absolutely, yes. So then, of course, some people know about this. This was attributed to Anne Lowe. This is her portrait gown worn for her 1952 portrait done by Douglas Chandor, who unfortunately passed away during the execution of the portrait. You can kind of see some missing details in his, especially his creation of the hands and holding her signature flower, the orchid. But people always ask about the scrolls on this gown, so I thought it would be fun to show you a reverse photo of how this gathered scroll was created on the where it joins the underskirt and the overskirt at the front of the gown. So you can really see the really masterful manipulation of the textile seen here. And this gown will be on loan very soon, so we're excited about that. Um, and then I also have to give a shout out to her favorite designer, Oldric Royce, who she loved working with. And we have over 25 pieces in the collection that were made by Oldric Royce, including these very cool diamond, silk organza printed with diamond late printed lace motifs. And if
That's an
you're interested in
amazing.
Oldric Royce, you must look at my predecessor, Howard Kurtz's amazing research on him. He published a 2017 catalog together with Eva Uchalova. Sorry if I've mispronounced. That is just a wonderful look at Royce's career, and it's so wonderful to have this as a repository and to be able to access all of Howard's research on this designer who Marjorie Post loved working with, based in New York.
Well, and it's what's lovely about this is also the pleating of that
Oh,
skirt,
yes.
how the diamond
Oh,
pattern comes through
comes
on the
together.
pleating within that. It's just really fantastic.
Yes, I love that she had a a cocktail version and then kind of a longer gown because she probably really loved the print. So it's really a special piece in the collection.
Hmm.
Moving into the last wedding dress, she married Herbert May in 1958. And she wore an Oldric Royce, this kind of blue confection, very kind of cocktaily, but lovely cap sleeves. She had great arms, so she went for the cap sleeve, which I love, and machine made lace and just some little pin tucks around the acetate. So really a lovely mid-century fourth wedding dress. And supposedly her husband Herbert May really loved the blue because it brought out the color of her eyes.
Oh, how sweet.
Yes. Other favorites, obviously this printed machine-made lace cocktail dress from Baumwood Teller. I just included for the riot of colors and the really beautiful scalloped edging and the slip. I know I'm running out of time.
No, you're
And
fine.
then
We still have a few minutes, so
we've
so
got
hurry up. Fine.
Eleanor Garnett, another great
Oh,
mid-century designer included in our collection. Research continues on her, and I'm sorry for the middle flat photo of that hot pink satin with velvet patterned gown, but I did want to show all three that are in the collection. And Eleanor Garnett was Estonian born, but had a shop in New York and had made in Italy labels on all of her gowns. So she's really interesting figure for me. And Marjorie Post wore the purple velvet and silk taffeta gown when she was presented the Legion of Honor in 1957. So she did choose to wear Eleanor Garnett at an important event in
that's
her life.
amazing.
We actually have a lot of Eleanor Garnett bodices, which need more research and study, but really incredible to have these examples in the collection. There's actually more than just the three I have here. There's something to the tune of 5. So I'm really excited to look more closely at those and dive in a little further on Eleanor Garnet. So if you have any leads on Garnet, please reach out. Trying to get the bat signal out to the CSA minds here. And so I mentioned accessories. She has a really impressive shoe collection, which is kind of legendary. She was a big Madame Bob client, and she's got more than 50 pairs of custom
Wow.
shoes in every color of the rainbow. She also was a very loyal local DC client of Esther Kerwin Steck. There's about 10 examples of her millinery in the collection. So it's really, and this is like great mid-century kind of pillbox, garden on the head, incredible work that it exists in the collection today. So that's something I wanted to share. And then, like many other costume collections that we all know about that are personal, we get these bits and bobs, silk flowers, metallic flowers, things she saved, buttons, glasses cases, little purses, stuff that you just kind of keep because they're so exquisite, or you snip them off of a gown that maybe has seen better days, but they're great examples of craftsmanship in the dressmaking field. Um, Textiles, that's a whole other beast. She was a
Wow.
lace collector. So we have a really vast collection of lace. We also have table linens from her various residents. Here are some embroidered napkins from her yacht, the Sea Cloud, which are really charming. Napkins and placemats. And so she liked to collect antique and contemporary lace, and she even used it to decorate her interiors or added it to garments that she owned. And then another fun discovery recently was finding staff uniforms in some of our trunks back in 2019. So you see some of them have local DC or New York labels on them, which is very fun and kind of unusual to find. And then, it's not all about Marjorie Merriweather Post. This actually represents about 4 generations in the costume collection, including her mother. That's her 1870s gray silk taffeta wedding dress, bustle, and then her 3 daughters, Adelaide, Eleanor, and Dina Merrill, are all kind of represented, as well as now grandchildren. We have one of her granddaughters' wedding dresses in the collection, and we've got stepdaughter's Pacan gown now in the collection that Marjorie Post bought for her.
Wow.
Really lovely, and you see Marjorie Post adjusting her stepdaughter's veil in the Brussels ambassador's residence, which is very fun in the late 30s. So kind of jumping off of that a little bit, that leads up to our upcoming exhibition in February, which I get to be the lead curator on. I'm very fortunate and excited. Marjorie Merriweather Post Paris, that will look at some of the examples. I said she's kind of light on French couture, but she also has some beautiful pieces of jewelry and furnishings in the collection. And then, of course, after that, in June of 2025, it will be a look at Princess Natalie Pelé, who is a fashion icon in her own right and a member of the Romanov dynasty, related to a new accession that we just acquired. So no shortage of fashion and textiles in the future. I close with this Sweet 16 gown in the collection.
Oh, wow.
She had a tendency to label, so this one's labeled My First Ball Gown, which is so sweet. And the beautiful metallic embellishment at the center back, and some details of the pearls and the coral, just for you, Leon. And of course, it was made in DC by the Baker sisters. So definitely it all comes back to Washington, DC, where we're located, and Her legacy continues here, even 100 years after she purchased this Sweet 16 gown in 1903. So,
Megan, thank you. That was a romp through.
oh my
y-
gosh, yes.
We
Really,
have a. Go ahead. Sorry.
really just breakneck, and I'm sorry. I just couldn't not show.
We have a bunch of questions that I'm going to start peppering you with. The first is, how many different china sets did she have or use?
I think she had in the hundreds, just
Wow.
based on her storage alone.
And next question, in the early when you were showing the pictures of the food on the table, are you using faux food on that table? And that
I
in,
think I think that was faux food when it's in the china.
yeah,
I wasn't there for that shoot, but I'm assuming it's faux food or there's a lining. I mean, I don't think it's real food.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great
a
question.
comment on the label, the punch label that you
Oh,
mentioned in
good.
terms of an
Yes.
interesting way for to create numbers as a label. Certainly archival if the media is. So we'll still
Mm,
put that out to the hive brain of everyone.
yeah, that would
Um,
be great.
what happened to the first husband, which you I think took.
Well, yeah,
Do
it
you want
just didn't
do
work
you want
out.
to elaborate on it? Yeah, it didn't work
Yeah,
out.
I think she was lucky in a lot of things, but maybe a little unlucky in love. Uh, so.
Um, Another question is, how do you know that the 1920 Lucille is pina cloth?
I actually have it from my notes from the previous curator, but I'm interested to hear other options of what people believe. We're not set up for fiber identification here in terms of microscope, so I would love to do a fiber analysis on it, but we just don't have the equipment. But I love that someone's questioning that and would love to delve further into that.
Oh, fantastic, excellent. And then the jewelry, how much of her jewelry is still around?
So we have 175 pieces at Hillwood, and then a lot of her significant jewelry comprises the National Gem Collection at the Smithsonian Natural Museum of Natural History on the mall. It's a long story, but Hillwood was originally intended to go to the Smithsonian. So during her lifetime, Marjorie Post and some of her daughters made some gifts to the Smithsonian. Yeah, they they retain the gifts. We have a wonderful relationship with them. But going forward after Post's death, it didn't work out with the Smithsonian. So there's about 10 pieces of her jewelry there. And then, of course, there's more in private hands.
Wow,
So-
a lot. Maybe they'll just give them back to you. Just, send them a request.
Some of them are, it's better that it's there.
Okay. Um,
Um,
Another question is, what were her measurements and height? And did she buy several of the same shoes to match the ditto dresses?
She definitely bought several of the same shoes. I do not have her measurements on me in front of me right now, but she was fairly tall, definitely taller than me, about 5'6" or 5'7". And Yeah, she had broad shoulder, kind of a long torso, and kind of wide shoulders, which is why I think the portrait gown style really worked for her.
It's a repeat theme. She found what she felt she looked good in
Exactly.
and carried through with it. It's
I
very
think
clear
I
that.
think she really that's why she liked being consistent with what designer or dressmaker or shop she worked with too,
Hmm.
because they really seem to get it
Yeah.
in terms of what she needed.
Is the Anne Lowe going to the First Ladies Museum or Winterthur?
It is going to Winterthur. I think it's okay for me to say that now. So I'm very excited about that project and honored to be included. So it's
That's
wonderful.
fantastic. That's
Yes.
fantastic. Um, Another question. It looks like she has faux curls later in her life on her head. Was that true?
Well, I think a lady never tells, but there are, her hair became like kind of a point of contention. If you go back to notes and correspondence, there was a person who worked with Hillwood kind of in the early giving tours days in the 60s who wrote her a note like, I think you should start using silver hairpins. We can all see the black. And she was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, dear. So yeah, her hair, I mean, the faux curls thing, I would have to really look into, but possible.
That's
Uh,
possible. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Her
Um,
hair was, I mean, it was always up
it was
in
it
the kind of French twist that you see.
and
Uh,
structured with those like sausage curls. It's really, yeah.
Completely structured. Yeah. As I
Yeah.
understand it, she had her hair done something like once or twice a week. She had a hairstylist out in Maryland that would come to her and do it. And she has a whole setup if you visit Hillwood in what we call the massage room. So she would have a professional grade sink, even a perming machine, and one of those hooded dryers, all set up for her to get her hair done in comfort at
Oh,
home.
fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. Next, where did you find the other bodices? You said that you have up to five of them. So the question is,
Yes,
where did
they
you find?
were founded in many of the different, just textile storage coming across these in a box labeled bodices. So kind of we had an inventory moment and they were discovered, and it's really exciting to look back at those, and makes me think of that 19th century practice of getting a dinner dress or having your dinner dress bodice and your day dress bodice and being able to exchange them, that we
Mhm.
hear about in fashion history. So I think it'll be fun to look at those more closely.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, and it looks like the last question is, I've been to Hillwood several times. Is there a separate area for costumes, or are they more, interlaced throughout the museum?
So I love that question because we usually display them in her bedroom closets. She's got two, and they are swapped out around twice a year, depending on the condition of the dress. And we install them related to the special exhibition. So you can always expect to see at least two costumes on display in the mansion. And then occasionally and more, we've been using them in special exhibitions, even when I'm not the lead curator. I've been persuading my colleagues to put a, put a costume in. So we've got some in our current Determined Women exhibition that was curated by my colleague Wilfred Zeisler. So the Determined Women that are focused on in there are Hattie Carnegie and also Madame Thurn, who I mentioned as one of the smaller New York import customs dressmaker kind of proprietor of dress in the 1920s. So yeah, I'm always trying to sneak them into special exhibitions where possible.
So are there still undiscovered treasures?
Well, generally no. Hopefully not. So I don't think so. But I've only been here 5 years, so I'm still discovering more and more as I continue to work here. So
Excellent. Um,
yes.
Megan, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for attending. This is a really fantastic presentation and overview of Hillwood and Ms. Post and
Thank
her
you.
vast collection. So, thank you so much. And as we wrap up today, I want to thank everyone for coming. Please follow the Costume Society of America on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure that you hear about all of our upcoming episodes on conversations on dress. And if you enjoyed today's content, we implore you to make a small or giant donation to keep the content free for all. It's been a great pleasure, Megan. Lovely to see
Thank you
you,
so
and
much,
I look
Leon.
forward
Thank
to
you all
seeing
for
you
having
soon.
me.